way, another team from this era as well, because that's the other thing. I actually do have a vision of history, by the way, in the same way as I have like the theory of like, I do believe in what you call superstar theory. I don't think there are just a load of good players. And, you know, if you just put like 5 good players in a team, you win. I think you do need like a superstar if you want to be the best team ever in the world. Because my theory goes, because a superstar is so much better, when you have that one game you really need to win where your team's losing, they can just win you the game. Like if you rely just on the team, you're not going to be able to sort of get those miracles. So in the same way as I believe in like the superstar theory in that sense, I also do believe what makes CS enjoyable is the elite teams. Like it's all well and good having a scene and competition, but what you really need is awesome top teams that have a really fucking cool style of play to watch. So another one from this era I have to bring was obviously Virtus Pro, isn't it? I always say this. I don't know how or why, because they were like this when they were a different lineup in 1.6. Somehow this team just made all the best matchups. Like, it didn't matter who they played. If they were playing the Danes of Astralis, fucking amazing games. If they were playing like MSL's teams, those would be awesome games with Morph back and forth. If they were playing Fnatic, these are some of the most epic back and forth games ever. Like, literally, Na'Vi, dude, you can go down the line. Like, this one team versus anyone was basically like just must watch CS. I know they're obviously famous for other reasons, but I always thought just the style of play alone, who isn't a fan of this team? They're just fucking amazing to watch, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they were one of the first teams to truly embody like the idea of momentum, right? Whenever they get the advantage, holy shit, like you're about to feel it. Whenever they know that they have you in the ropes, they're going to start playing faster and duel oriented, and they will go to the simplest and the simplest and the simplest move to beat you. And also, I think they were probably, at the time, underrated from a skill standpoint. I think they had extremely skilled players. Like, Bayali is definitely not the hero of that story, but yeah, he was shooting like hell. Snacks was obviously upcoming, and then we know what Snacks happened to be. And then I also think that with the experience, because for people who aren't aware, likes of Neo and Taz were very familiar with competition, even Pasha as well, because they had known sort of that sphere and that circle. I think they were mentally very equipped to deal with a whole lot of like high pressure situation. Like they dealt with it much better than most of the other teams, and you were going up against them, and I obviously squared with them quite a few times.
Sure.
And when the scoreline was getting to 14-14, like they were not shaking at all.
Yes.
Like was probably when they would actually hit you with their best execute, and everything would be polished, and they would win the round. And like this was a little bit the idea of there are players who are going to step up in high pressure situation. They are going to make the move that matters because they have like the backbone and they have the nerves to do it. And VP were a very good example of that. They were like, if we were a bunch of kids playing Counter-Strike, they were men. Like they were men. Yes. They were adults. They were coming in, and if you had a little bit of doubt, they would kick you in the ass, and that was it. And I was on the beating or the other end of that beating a couple times before we actually beat them in Cologne. But yeah, I liked it. I liked how they were. There was some roughness to their game. Like they were rough. You know, if you're getting a little bit weak, that's it. Are you about to get contacted with one puff flash? They were one of the first ones to just do on Mirage. Like everyone just puff flash through the smoke A-ramp. No one really was doing that. Like we all thought, oh, that's okay. That smoke is safe. No. If they felt like you were doubting, 1 or 2 puff flash, that's it. Everyone out the ramp, straight in your face, never let you breathe. And that was super exciting to watch and really unfun to play against.
Yeah, along those lines, by the way, a couple of things. One is that what you're talking about, that style of play, like what they essentially understood as a core of players somehow was like how pressure works in the game. And like you're saying, at the right moment, they know how to like pile it on and make that like an enemy against you, basically, and make it worse for you. Because if people don't know, they not only did that in the game, but like that was actually part of the mystique of VP, if people don't know. Like they would actually keep a whole vibe of like, they would sometimes like mock other players, or they'd have a vibe of sort of like, they had like a standoffish attitude if people don't know. But the funny thing is, years later, if you did get to know them, I already knew some of the players anyway, but like when the other, like the French scene and the Danish scene actually got to hang out with them, these are actually some of the most chill people, by the way. They're not actually violent people. Like these people aren't like getting into fights, but they understood that because people have this image of like, what's this fucking big burly guys coming from Poland, holy shit, look at Pasha. Like they knew how to play up to that though. Like they did give you, they had intimidation factor like no other team. The difference is, if someone like Fnatic or Astralis is intimidated, it's because of what they're going to do to you in the server. For real, the vibe with VP is like, if you trash talk them too much, maybe they beat you up. They wouldn't really, by the way. That's never really even on the table unless you were a dickhead. But like, there was a vibe like that. People were intimidated by the Maniac, right? People did sort of feel like, fuck, you better not fuck around, it's VP. Like, that was a real thing. Yeah. And then the other thing I'll just throw in there is, you've nailed it, by the way. Dude, at this point in history, Bialy's mega underrated. Like, now, what's weird is, because of all the epic players, everyone remembers Snacks. Everyone goes, oh, Snacks was brilliant. It's like, mate, it was Snacks and Bialy back then. And in fact, if you go back far enough, once upon a time, there's a reason Pasha was like top 10 in HLTV that year they won the major. He was a monster back in the day. It was only for a year or so, but he was very good. No, Bialy's mega underrated, mate. Again, this is one of those players where, like, if you want to see like amazing aim, if I could take you to some games in like 2015 where this guy has as good aim as anyone with a rifle, mate. He's like, he had the fucking laser. Like, you remember what he was like when he'd just be on like a cache on the A site or something. Like, you could never get him off it. He was just going to fucking kill 3 people and be alive if you can't get to him. Like, he's a nightmare to play. Like, that's actually a player where he didn't work on his personality. He didn't try to do interviews, so people can't remember him. He probably is mega underrated now, mate. He's a mega player. Think how many years he was at the top as well. Like, a solid 2 or 3 years where he's elite player basically.
But I think he was used the way he was supposed to be used. I think this was one of the strengths of VP as well. And at least for me, that team helped build what I believed was a right recipe for success, which is the ratio between experience and sort of new players coming up and have the raw mechanical skill. But you also need to have people with personality and need people to have nerves. And they were all sort of bringing something different to the table because, again, you're talking about this standoffish attitude. Whenever you were in a 2 versus 2 versus Neo and Taz, they're not going to chicken shit the clutch and play it wrongly. Like, they might not be at the peak of their career mechanically, but they know how they're supposed to play that clutch. And they have no doubt about it. Whereas the Bialy, the Snacks and all, they were super mega skilled. Of course, Snacks was also a genius of the game. That was a nice little coincidence at the time. But they would just send out Bialy like a heat-seeking missile just out of range with a couple flashes. And same with Pasha. Like, honestly, the impact that Pasha had compared to his mechanical skill is bonkers.
Oh, it's respectable,
because if you compare him to other MVPs, people who arguably could do better with just a mouse and a keyboard in itself in isolation, but they never really had the impact that he had because, hey, he didn't care at all. Like, if he thought he could 4K you, and if he should have gone back after 2, there's none of that. Like, if he thinks he can get 3, he'll go. If he can get 4, he'll be in your face again. So, yeah, he was really pushing the envelope. And I liked what they built. I liked the blueprint of like experience and new blood coming together. That helped form like a model that I kept with me for many of my years, and I still sort of have it. In fact.
You know, the saddest thing is as well, I actually do think there was a lesson in that team that other big squads could have done, but people just didn't for like personal reasons, which is, in my opinion, Astralis and Fnatic, like the all-time great lineups of their particular squads, actually did also have this quality, which is the genius of the team. If people remember, famously VP never used to recruit anyone. They had that line that was like, instead of changing players, we change roles. And that sounds like just some shit you'd say in like a movie or something. It doesn't sound real, right? But I actually do think that's what some of these other teams did. Like, I think there were times, like, if you look in Astralis, there were times when people like Dupree gave up some of their space or took some of the space as the entry if they needed to. In Fnatic, there was times when JW was like seemingly the main guy, then Olaf was the main, you know, it seemed like whatever period they were in, they could adapt in that regard. Whereas I do think actually there were some other all-time great teams where it's like, if it didn't work, they just caught someone. And it's like, some of these squads, when you've got players that are good enough, like the VP one, maybe it's only a tweak you need. You know what I mean? Like, maybe like one person has to just call on a certain map. Maybe we just need, like, let's redo our Inferno CT spots or something. Because I will say, one thing that a lot of teams do actually do as well, Maniac, maybe this was old school thinking, was a lot of, this is why I always thought was whack. The best example is, you know, when the Brazilians fell off on Inferno and they just couldn't play Inferno anymore. If you ever watched, dude, they still had Cold Zero, who was like the best pit player in the whole world. And I used to say to Fallen, bro, you have the best in the world at one site. Like, you don't just give up on the map. You have to just keep trying, like, essentially, like, figure out a different B setup, figure out a different rotation, whatever it is. Like, it'd be stupid to give up this advantage, wouldn't it? Like, think about it. If you've got the best guy on a spot on a map, you want to find a way to make it work. But, like, yeah, basically that approach, like, everyone else does just cut someone and just get the new guy or get the new guy with the better numbers. Like, that VP approach is also mad admirable because they didn't just say it, dude. They actually did it. Like, it clearly worked 2 or 3 times over a bunch of years.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to preface what I'm going to say with that I don't exactly know what was happening within the team, so I'm going to suggest or imagine what could be happening. They would probably be in a better position to talk about it as I am. But I have a feeling that this line that you're talking about from VP, they actually went through the whole, we are going to talk to each other and there are issues and we're not changing and fuck it, let's talk about it. Whereas I think a whole lot of people in Counter-Strike, just in life in general, have a tendency to shy away from this confrontation and just say, hey, you know what, this lineup ain't working. Well, obviously this isn't my fault, so player at the bottom of the stats, well, you are the one on the hot seat, thank you very much. You're the reason why we're losing. Have a good day. We're going to recruit someone else who's better and suddenly we're going to win. I think VP were probably one of the first ones to say, okay, why are we not winning? Like, what is going on? Is it do we have the wrong positions here? Is someone not doing their job? Should we should I be the AWP? Should I be the leader? Do you want to try to be the leader? And this idea that you're really going to exhaust all of the solutions that you have within the roster, and you're going to address whatever the hell is going on and try to figure it out, in itself, I think is good. I guess the downside or the flip side of it is you might sometimes be a bit too stubborn, and you know, might miss the chance. I think a lot of people would argue that VP in some moments in history could have added new blood from the Polish scene who was up and coming.
Potentially.
And this could have been a difference maker when the team was on the falling out, which was obviously after all of the moments that we were remembering here. But still, I appreciated the idea of like, hey, we're five, we're in this together. Why is it not working? Let's address it. Let's talk about it. Well, how can we fix it? How do we try? Why is it not working? Instead of just shying away from this and just do the easy thing, which is to switch line, because the French scene was obviously famous for that. Like
yes.
Anything that wasn't going good after a few months, we just switch a player like we're switching socks and be like, well, surely this is going to be better now because all of the other issues that we've had in the past lineups will evaporate now that someone else is coming in. Obviously, this was non-spoken, but this was one of the like unofficial truth that people thought would actually happen. So I like that VP were not on that boat.
No, mate, if people don't know, back in the day, the French scene was more like the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones. It's like you just wake up one day and half the team's gone. Like, you're out, you're fired, we've all betrayed you, we're bringing you. And not only that, it's just like Game of Thrones. It's like, we're not just replacing you, we're bringing in the most hated enemy ever to replace you. Like, you're like, what the hell? I thought we all hated them. Exactly. I thought we all hated that fucker. And now he's just here in the team. That's exactly what it's like. I know, it's ridiculous. They were so cynical as well with some of the cuts. Like, because I've told this story before. Like, I've obviously, if you come from England, you learn French in school, and I knew a little bit about the French scene in 1.6, but I've always said this, it wasn't that big in 1.6. Obviously, people played Source instead, so, like, I knew, like, MSX or the old school guys from Against All Authority or whatever, but, like, I wasn't super hooked into the scene. So I remember, I actually didn't know that much about French culture. I remember going to the early events and saying to people like Samuel, like, but what's going on? Because I could understand like the most basic level French. And then when I would listen to them talking, people who in theory are supposed to hate each other maniac, like Existence and MBK, or like Shocks and MBK, you know, all the people who had all the rivalries, in these bars at the after party, they would all just be like, oh, how are you doing? And they talk, and I'd be like, what the fuck? They hate that guy. They just caught him a month ago. And someone was like, it's just the way they do things, mate. Like, you know, like he told me that essentially like the culture reality is different from sort of like the team reality and being in the squad, and he's supposed to like separate them out. So at the time I remember just thinking, like, this scene is wild, bro. Like literally, like they're going to cut this, like, and they'd be doing it the other way around. Like they'd all be really funny. I'm like, but I've heard he's already out. And they're like, oh yes, he's out next week. Like, holy shit. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.